everyone. First, thanks again for joining, especially if it's like early or your lunch hour. I'm Amishi. I'm the head of industrial and CER research at Rubicon Carbon. So that just means I'm part of the science team. I do that due diligence that Jen was talking about. We really investigate the technologies and projects we're investing in because, as she said, we hold our credits. So it's really important for us to understand the risks and the values that all of the credits and projects have, so we can create like a very risk diversified, a hedged offering to our consumers. So my background actually was more in the carbon dioxide space at DOE. I invested in early TRL technologies that really looked at turning CO2 into value-added products or carbon dioxide removal. So when it came to Rubicon, there's this whole suite of projects that didn't have this TRL, this technology readiness level risk, but really were targeting non-CO2 gases that we called super pollutants that were exhibiting a different type of risk, right? It was the deployment risk, it was accounting, it was monetization. And I've really learned a ton about these super pollutants. It's been a while, since grad school, honestly, since I've engaged with them. And just understanding how much of an impact these projects have was eye-opening. So one of the biggest things to take away from super pollutants is that they have an outsized global warming impact. So we'll call that GWP. And just for measurements, it's pretty much how much warming it's measured against CO2. So GWP is usually set to 1, and that 1 means that it's 1 molecule of CO2 over a time span. We're going to set it to 100 years, and that's the baseline we set. So we can measure and compare other emissions to that warming potential. Methane is 28 times as worse as CO2. So that's effectively saying, like, over a course of 100 years, even if these methane molecules live less, if you set that warming timeline to 100 years, that 1 molecule of methane is like the same impact as 28 molecules of CO2. That's insane. When you get to nitrous oxide, it's even worse. It's 265 times as worse. And when you get to HFCs, right, these were things that I thought of as alternatives, as solutions to CFCs, HCFCs, right? Those were things that were punching a hole in the ozone, which were terrible, but HFCs were the alternative. They are thousands of times worse depending on the chemical. And that was just mind-boggling for me to comprehend. So all of these super pollutants really have accounted for nearly half of the global warming that we're seeing in this industrial era. So they're very impactful, especially in the near term. So enter super pollutant elimination credits. So these are the things that we invest in and that you can see on the market. So a super pollutant elimination project, or an SPE project, that's what we'll call it, is structured more or less in the same way. You have a business as usual or a counterfactual scenario. And in that scenario, your super pollutant would be emitted into the atmosphere from your human activity, right? That's what would have happened. Enter your project activity, and you're abating that super pollutant from reaching the atmosphere in some manner. So for methane projects, this can look like abating or capturing the methane from agriculture, like manure lagoons or landfills, capping it, capturing the methane that comes out and burning it, using it for energy, or just even flaring it off so it doesn't hit the atmosphere as methane. Also from oil and gas, right? You can have natural gas pipelines, and you can have distribution lines, risers that go into people's homes that can be leaky, and you can address those leaks so it stops the methane from leaking there. In all of these cases, you get credit for avoiding that methane from hitting that atmosphere. And that's the credit that you can sell and monetize and get money to continue your project activity. HFC projects look a little different. HFCs are in a lot of stuff. They're used in your refrigeration systems, right? They're the things that create the cold. They can be in HVAC, they can be in ACs. And while they are the leading, the third gen of our options, they are still so bad for the environment. And as you use your processes, as you use your refrigeration systems, they get spent. So often you can just toss the refrigerator, or you can repair it or replace that fluid. And instead, it's very easy to just vent that spent fluid, right? When you open it up, it's not like a toxic plume that comes out. It's just like, poof, to the atmosphere, but each one of those molecules, right, can be thousands of times worse than a molecule of CO2. So these projects, reclamation projects in particular, get technicians to go out with equipment, gather that spent fluid, take it to a central place, reclaim it, clean it up, and put it back into the market. So you get credit for making sure that more virgin HFCs aren't being put into the market, and instead you're replacing it, getting another use cycle out of those HFCs. You can also trade them out in manufacturing. They're used for like foam insulation. So swapping that in the manufacturing process for something that has a lower GWP is also a really great project. We are also getting projects that look at destroying them altogether, right? There is no way it can reach the atmosphere if you destroy that. It's more common to see those destruction projects really coming out of ozone depleting substances. These are things that came before HFCs, the CFCs and HCFCs. Really, there's a strong push to go in and actually like find those stockpiles and catalytically burn them up, make sure they never can touch the atmosphere that way. There's a nitrous oxide abatement, really. That's an emission that comes from chemical fertilizer manufacturing. And all of these project activities are implemented in a way that creates an avoidance of those emissions being released and gives you a stream of credits to monetize on. So as I mentioned before, we really looked at the value and the risks, and I just want to leave on some of the values on what we took away when we were crafting our SPE portfolio. One of them is that SPEs are effective, reliable, and high quality, right? A lot of these pathways actually have the ICVCM badge of CCP, that high integrity label, which I think is fantastic. It goes to show there isn't that much technology risk that I talked about earlier that you can see in emerging like pathways, especially in the CDR space. You're not contending with that. These are a lot more reliable, a lot more learned. SPE projects are also effectively permanent, especially for climate impact, right? When you take that action of avoiding the emissions from hitting the atmosphere, that's effectively permanent. You can't undo that action like you can if you're maintaining a carbon stock, right? Like in a nature-based solution or like in biochar, you can't unburn that methane. So that's a wonderful thing we consider when we have to balance our risks and our values in our portfolio. These projects are good for immediate emissions reductions in your decurb strategy. I think that's really important. If you are a person that is, or corporate that's hitting your targets, you're looking decades down the line and you got money, like CDR is where you could be moving the needle. If you are not hitting your targets today, if you are dealing with emissions right here, right now, and you need to spend money today, I think these offsets are a really good option for you, and especially when you consider they're reasonably priced. So I think all those things in concert really has led to a bit more momentum in the space. A lot more people are talking about SPEs. They're talking about engaging with these projects and buying and retiring these credits.